What do you mean they said no?
The producer said you're not professional enough to be in the Angry Video Game Nerd movie.
Not professional enough? This is a guy who takes fake shits on games.
Speaking of movies, I worked out a deal with Disney.
Walt Disney?
No, Brian Disney, the plumber. Would you let me finish? With the Avengers movie coming out, Disney has some extra advertising dollars to throw around. So I worked out a deal for you to review Captain America and the Avengers as a marketing tie-in.
That's unbelievable. That's great.
All you have to do is review the NES game, and you're in.
Finally, you've come through.
Oh, I forgot to mention, there is one small caveat to the review.
Oh yeah? What's that?
Good day, citizen! Welcome to Pat the NES Punk's review of Captain America and the Avengers, sponsored by Marvel's The Avengers, in theaters only, May 4th.
We're gonna have fun, Cap. And thanks for letting us know that the movie's only in theaters, just in case I open up my mailbox and expected to see it there.
Say, Patrick, this wooden chair is a little dusty. Perhaps you could clean it to a superhero sheen.
Why sure, Captain America. Let me take care of that for you.
Pledge, the official furniture polish of Marvel's The Avengers. See The Avengers May 4th, only in theaters.
The Avengers!
Data East released the Captain America and the Avengers arcade game in 1991. It was a 4-player beat-em-up which featured Captain America, Hawkeye, Vision, and Iron Man. That game would not be ported over to the Sega Genesis and Super Nintendo until a few years later. An entirely different NES game with the same name was also released in 1991, a platformer starring the same 4 Avengers. Or just 2 of them. So the game really should be called Captain America and Hawkeye, as you have to rescue the other 2 Avengers from Mandarin. What, so Iron Man and Vision are hostages in the game? Mandarin is mainly an Iron Man villain, so whatever, we'll roll with it. I know Iron Man has an alcohol problem, but come on. Like previously stated, you're platforming and bashing heads as Cap and Hawkeye, using one at a time. They both have their separate attacks, strengths, and weaknesses. Cap tosses his shield as a weapon, which returns to him. Cap can only throw his shield while he's standing, though. While the shield is out of his hand, Cap can punch. When crouched, he'll punch, and in the air, he'll do a jump kick. He does have a couple of all-American special moves to add to the repertoire. The first is a jumping downward shield attack, which can also keep you above water or spikes, and a dash tackle attack, which is actually more useful to dodge enemies most of the time. Cap's shield can also reflect some bullets, which is a nice touch since it can do that also in the comics. Hawkeye uses his trademark bow and arrows for the majority of his attacks. He can shoot one at a time both forward and backward, and like Cap can attack with a punch while an arrow is on the screen. Unlike Cap, Hawkeye can shoot his arrows straight up into the air or on a diagonal, while crouching and while jumping. This makes him much more adept than the Captain at handling enemies in the air, and unlike Cap's shield, at the start of the game the arrows travel the full length of the screen. He does not have any special moves however, and by default the arrows seem to be a little weaker than Cap's shield. Captain America has one other special technique that Hawkeye does not, which comes in useful when traversing the levels. Cap puts his gymnastic training to use by being able to grab onto, hang onto, and jump from ledges, pipes, and some platforms. This enables him to get up and reach areas of levels that Hawkeye cannot. You start out at an overhead map of the US and have to advance gradually towards the northwest. Your icons represent Hawkeye and the Cap, and you can choose which to control as you advance at your discretion forward. What you really want to do is team up Cap and Hawkeye so you can use them on the same level and switch off between them. To accomplish this, you'll have to defeat the level where one of the 2 heroes is by using the other. Once you do that, your icon will change into an Avenging A, and you'll move together as a couple until one of the 2 Avengers dies, but more on that later. In every stage, you'll usually advance non-linearly at your own pace, looking to collect a crystal to unlock the exit to move on. There are also random points to collect, which do nothing, gemstones, which I'll explain later, and hearts. Hearts, of course, replenish your life.
When collecting hearts, it's important to make sure that you switch back and forth between Hawkeye and Captain America, so both heroes can replenish their health.
You know what normally replenishes me? A nice cold drink.
Yes, Cap, my thirst could use a quenching.
Diet Dr. Pepper, the official soft drink of Marvel's The Avengers. See The Avengers May 4th, only in theaters.
Advancing through the stages, you'll encounter only about half a dozen different enemies or so, which include soldiers firing rifles, soldiers firing bazookas, and what looks like the Predator? What? Unfortunately, this doesn't really change throughout the game, nor do the mid-level bosses you'll encounter, of which there are only two different types, Fireman and Dynamite Napalm. Yeah, we're really shooting up into the creative stratosphere with those names. Controls are fairly responsive, although I'm really down on the double tap to do Cap's charge attack, which doesn't always feel right in execution. Sometimes the platform jumping doesn't seem totally solid either, but there's really not a lot to complain about here. There's rarely a cheap death, aside from poor level design sometimes where you'll fall into the fire pit with no warning, or when you're forced to jump in and out of acid which damages you. The graphics are pretty good, not great, for an early 90s NES title. You can easily identify Hawkeye, Cap, and the comic villains like Crossbones and Ultron. There's a good variety of colors that are used in the levels, which is good since there's not a lot of variety in the levels themselves, which I'll speak about in 20 seconds or so. The character animation is solid, especially with the jumping and attacking movements. The sound effects are good. Cap's shield tosses and Hawkeye's arrow shots sound appropriate, and the explosions of enemies are poppy. The music, however, is more dicey. There are only two main stage themes, one for each of the two heroes, and they restart whenever you switch back and forth between them within the level. Hate that. The music isn't bad, but it's certainly not good enough to hear looping constantly, over and over again. The level design suffers from a similar fate. There are only a handful of level types: forest, construction site, city, underground lair, and they repeat, with only some small layout differences in enemies and obstacles each time. And oh yeah, the color palette changes. Whoopee! And speaking of the levels, it's definitely interesting some of the choices of cities that were made. I didn't know Tampa had such lush waterfalls. And fiery pits of death in Philadelphia? Well, actually that one's pretty accurate. So while the game starts off fun, it gets monotonous after a while with the same enemies, same music, and similar levels that repeat. The game designers probably realized this, and so unfortunately they decided to throw in a slight RPG element which almost ruins the entire experience. Throughout the levels are gemstones you collect to power up Cap and Hawkeye's attack strength, as well as the maximum health they can accrue. Every 100 collected powers up either Cap or Hawkeye, and they each have independent counts. You have to press start to see how many gems you have for each hero. I'm not sure why they couldn't have just put that on the gameplay screen. I guess they wanted to annoy you by having you constantly check. The problem with this system is that it does not reward you really. As you advance through the game, the enemies not only become more difficult, but they do more damage to you than they did earlier in the game. So you might find it's easier to be killed than before. The one useful and interesting feature of the game suddenly becomes almost null because of this. If they kept the attacks of your enemies at the same strength, then it would make sense to risk your life and reward your extra playing time to collect these stones. Especially since you have to annoyingly switch back and forth between Cap and Hawkeye in doing so. A bonus annoyance is at the end of each stage when Wasp, another Avenger, tells you things you already know.
Thanks for that useful advice, Wasp. I've only been playing the game for, 2 hours and I know what I'm doing. But still, you're more useful than whatever Scarlett Johansson's supposed to be doing in the Avengers movie. Seriously, what's her superpower against the aliens? The ability to pout and give them erections?
Black Widow is the veritable glue that holds the Avengers team together.
What? Glue? Oh no.
Yes, the glue. Elmer's, the official multi-purpose glue of Marvel's The Avengers. See The Avengers May 4th, only in theaters.
But do you know what ultimately makes this game unfun? How you are treated when you lose a life. If you die as either Captain America or Hawkeye, that hero becomes captured. You'd think that probably would just mean going into the next city or so to rescue your ally, but no. What happens is that they take your captured hero and throw him across the US. So what that means is that you either have to backtrack with your other hero, defeating the same levels again that you already went through until you get back to your fallen comrade, or you find an A or H icon which will release that hero at the spot they've been transferred to. Either way, it means you'll have to play through 5 or 6 of the same levels again that you've already played through at least once before. And you can expect to encounter this every time you lose a life, since the strength of your game relies on being able to switch off between Cap and Hawkeye in the middle of the levels. If you then die with the other hero, you'll use one of your continues and then will be forced to go through the painful process of rescuing your comrade anyway, since you'll only have one hero to start, and having both your heroes alive is an insurance policy of sorts to make sure you don't continue again. This was a terrible and idiotic decision by Data East. What was a somewhat enjoyable game is now rendered tedious due to this flaw. It's not fun having to defeat the same mid-level bosses 17 times. It's not a bag full of laughs having to plod through the same levels again and again to find the same crystals to move on. It just becomes a bore, and this is the undoing of Captain America and the Avengers. They really twist the knife with this point when Wasp tells you that you can find the Quintjet in Las Vegas, which enables you to skip across the map, thus avoiding the awful fate that awaits you when a hero is killed. That's nice, but you can only get the Quintjet once you're through 90% of the game. Now I'm annoyed, and I'm no longer going to just glance over this whole lack of Avengers thing either. You can't play as Iron Man, and you can't play as Vision. Just call the game Captain America and Hawkeye go on a cross-country vacation, since that's really what this game is. How hard would it have been to draw and animate Iron Man and Vision, so you could use 4 characters, like in the arcade game, or like the depiction on the box art or in the manual. Why are you bothering to tell me about superheroes that I cannot even use in the game? Damn superhero teases! Alright, Data East, if you couldn't do a port of the arcade game like Konami did with the Turtles arcade game, at least don't rub it in! If they were too lazy to have the 4, which they advertise, why not at least have Iron Man, Ant-Man, and other Avengers as special attack assist characters that could clear the screen of enemies, like a super move. Don't just have Wasp rambling about things we already know about. For God's sake, give us Captain America and the Avengers!
I'm tired talking about this disappointment of a game. I don't even want to discuss the tacked-on silly 2-player battle mode, like the one they have in Double Dragon. I need a nap.
Sounds like you need some energy. At times like this, a superhero like me supercharges his diet with potassium.
Oh, come on!
Chiquita Bananas, the official organic banana of Marvel's The Avengers.
I feel dirty.
Pledge also works great on hardwood floors.
Never have I felt so degraded in my entire life. Forced to be a corporate shill in my review. The money better be worth it, AJ. When am I getting the check?
What check?
The check for me being a Disney stooge?
I said I got you a deal. I didn't say anything about you being paid for it.
Then what sort of deal was it for? Are they going to fly me out to the world premiere? Are they going to give me a lunch date with Scarlett Johansson?
You still have that restraining order against you from Comic-Con? But listen, how does a voucher for a free movie ticket and a medium popcorn and soda sound?
Just give me 1 second. I'm looking around for a whistle.
Show some gratitude, man. I negotiated you up from a small.
I think I'm going to kick you in the taint.